Hi, I'm Jacqueline Rinksmeyer, Executive Director of the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce.
And I'm Jared Fry, General Manager and Public Information Officer for the City of Medina and Medina TV.
One of the core values of the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce is business advocacy. We've been proud to partner with Medina TV on this voter education series for well over 10 years now. We're grateful to our interviewer and General Manager of Medina TV, Jared Fry, and our producer, Matt Tomick.
We're grateful for all the candidates that took part in the Candidates Forum, but we also want to stress that the opinions of those candidates are not those necessarily of Medina TV or the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce.
All candidates and contested races were invited to participate in this voter education program.
We want all voters to be informed to the best of the ability as they head to the ballot this November, so sit back and relax and enjoy our Candidates Forum.
We encourage you to make a plan to vote this November.
Joining us in studio now is the incumbent of the Ohio Supreme Court, Justice Melody Stewart. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. First, let's start off, and could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a native Ohioan, born and raised in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area primarily. I'm the child of a single mother who had me later in life. My mother was 40 when I was born. And she grew up in the segregated South, in a state where the schools only went up to the 8th grade for Negro or black children in her state. And she was one of 11 children, 9 girls and 2 boys. And so when the girls finished 8th grade, they either worked domestically for a family or they moved up north for better work opportunities. My mother did the latter. Moved to Washington, D.C. first, because that's about an hour outside of her small town in Virginia, and then made her way to Cleveland. And so although she only had an 8th grade education, I found after she passed that my mother went back to school and got her GED went back and got her GED when she was in her 60s, about a year before I finished college. Mm-hmm. And so I was surprised by that because she kept it a secret, but I shouldn't have been surprised because my mother had such a love of education. Mm-hmm. And she acted at Caramoo Theater in Cleveland, if you're familiar with that, back in the 40s and 50s, before I was even born. She did crossword puzzles and jigsaw puzzles and wrote poetry and taught me to play Password and Scrabble when they were not electronic games or that your handheld games. And she taught me those when I was about 8 years old. And I didn't beat her until I got to college, especially in Scrabble. And so loved music and worked at the post office and retired from the post office and worked overtime so that I could have music lessons and go to the Cleveland Music School settlement. And she also taught me to read the ticker tape symbols for the stock markets on stock market pages on the newspapers at home. And so she instilled in me the love of education and the love of the arts and musical theater and those sort of things, which I've taken into my career and who I am.
Wow, what an incredible woman. Yeah. Kind of take a second and walk the voters through what is the role of a justice of the Ohio Supreme Court?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. A lot of people don't know. Even some lawyers, particularly newly minted lawyers, don't know. And so when we talk about judges and the judiciary, most people think of what they see on television, which are primarily trial court judges, men and women who sit on the bench by themselves. They control the whole courtroom. They tell the jury what to do and their instructions. They control the witness testimony. And those men and women make decisions that affect everybody's lives for the most part. They terminate parental rights. They decide your medical malpractice or personal injury suits. They sentence people to prison. And so day to day, your parking tickets or speeding tickets. So day to day, trial court judges are really have a more direct impact on day to day lives. If you don't like what that trial court did or you think that judge made a mistake, you have a right to appeal to the intermediate appellate courts. In Ohio, we have 12. 3 of them are just comprised of single counties, Cuyahoga, Hamilton, and Franklin, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus. So our other 9 districts are made up of 85 other counties. And you have a right to appeal those decisions, everything from criminal sentencing, traffic ticket, planning and zoning decision. You pay your fee, get it in on time, you have a right to appeal. And those courts are comprised of 3 judges. They sit in 3 judge panels, regardless of how many judges are actually on the court. You don't have a right to appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court. With rare exception, Some direct appeal cases we have to take, like death penalty cases, public utility cases. We get to pick and choose what cases that come in the court. So some people say, well, how do you decide that? Is it how you feel that day? Is it an issue that's not boring? Or no, we have criteria that we choose cases that we think we need to settle the law in, or cases that are of great general interest to the state or of public importance. Because we sit as 7 and we have to decide everything as a court, as 7. If we had to take court cases just to correct the errors, we could never get anything done. So we are not an error-correcting court. The Court of Appeals is the error-correcting court. And most cases terminate there. So in a lot of ways, they are the court of final resort for the most part. But I think when we decide on what takes cases, I think the diversity of the court is important here, because we need jurists on the Supreme Court who thinks that some issue of fracking that maybe happens in the 7th District, in the Valley, in Trumbull and Mahoning County, that part of the state. Those are issues that are important to that region. But if you are from Northwest Ohio or Southern Ohio, those are issues that might not be as important to you, or if you haven't served on the appellate court. So I think the diversity of perspective is good for getting in cases that are of great general interest to the state, not just solely important about business or criminal sentencing. And so we vote, and if you get 4 votes, that case comes in. We look at about 30 to 50 jurisdictional appeals every other week. Sometimes we take none. Sometimes we take 2 or 3. So the overwhelming majority of cases appealed to our court don't get in.
And how do you, as you look at those and you're making that vote, trying to get the 4 votes for that, how do you, I guess yourself as a justice, how do you look at that to determine, do you look at not necessarily just the case itself, but the broader scope of what the result of the case could have an impact on?
Absolutely, and that's really our job, our responsibility, because there are times where I look at cases and I go, wow, Court of Appeals messed up on that one, made a bad decision on that one, got that one wrong, but we can't take it just because it's wrong. And I know that's going to sound shocking to a lot of people, because you're the Supreme Court, you need to correct that mistake. Again, we're not an error-correcting court. And so if it's a case, and lawyers need to do a good job of arguing how important this particular issue is to the whole state, and using his or her case as the conduit for this important decision that will affect everybody. But oftentimes, lawyers will submit appeals to us and tell us about the manifest injustice to his or her client. And that could be true, but that doesn't make it worthy to come into the court. And so the lawyers have to do a better job, too, at showing us the importance of why we need to hear the case or reverse the decision. There was a case we had where a family sued Amazon for a product that their daughter ended up taking and dying from, but the product was purchased by a friend that she took. It was caffeine powder or something. Now, Amazon is the biggest e-retailer there is. That decision is going to have an impact on e-commerce in Ohio and probably elsewhere. So that's the kind of case we took in. Or if appellate court decisions are all over the place. Somebody in the 4th District might decide a case on similar facts. The 6th District decided a case and they went opposite directions. We've got to take that case to resolve it so that the law across the state of Ohio is consistent.
Now, again, we're talking with Justice Melody Stewart, the incumbent for Ohio Supreme Court. A question I've always wondered, and I'm sure the folks at home do too, we're human beings. You have opinions on things and matters like that. So how do you differentiate as a justice? One, I'll touch on in my next question as far as party races being involved now, but you have party races being involved, you have your own personal stance or opinions on an issue, and then also looking at the letter of the law. How do you balance that as a justice?
Yeah, I think I've mastered it, quite frankly, almost. You heard me talk about my mother earlier today, and she obviously was a very important figure in my life. But I could sit on a case where my mother was a party and decided impartially, and that sounds strange. Now, of course, I would never be able to sit as a jurist on a case that involved a family member, but I could do that because we all take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Ohio and the Constitution and laws of the state of the United States. And so we're to do that. And so when a law is plain, if it's written in language that everybody can understand, then we apply the law as written. But when it comes to interpretation of the law, One, I'm not a results-oriented jurist. I don't seek a certain outcome. The outcome that I come to, the conclusion I come to for an outcome is based on what the law says, what we have said as a court in the past. When we speak as a court, even though I haven't been a member on the court since its inception, obviously, but we speak as a court. And so we look to how the court decided certain issues, precedents or stare decisis, back before, although times have changed and circumstances are different. Technology is different. The way we live life now isn't the way we lived life in 220 something years ago when the court was first brought about. So I don't lose track of common sense either. And if something needs to be interpreted, then we interpret it in a way that makes sense based on legislative history, if it's a statute, or in keeping with the statute, the constitutional provision, be it from a constitutional amendment or some of the original drafting of the Ohio Constitution. And so to me, that's not really difficult or hard to do, particularly when you're not trying to bend the law or twist it so that it's an outcome that you particularly want. And we do have to put our personal feelings and our thoughts and our personal preferences aside. There are times where I have to make a decision based on what the law says, and I think it's a distasteful decision. And I can say that. I can write and say how this law works of manifest injustice to a particular group of people. And I can say that in a written opinion, but I still have got to follow the law.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And now the newest thing, I guess, that in 2021, they decided to add party affiliation to the justices for the Supreme Court. Kind of what are your thoughts as far as bringing politics into the judicial system?
Well, first let me go back to who the they is in that instance. So when I ran for the Supreme Court in 2018, the Supreme Court was comprised of justices who all belonged to one political party. And I don't think a one-party Supreme Court is good for anybody, regardless of the party. And so when I won that year and Justice Mike Donnelly won that year, we took a 7-0 Republican Supreme Court to 5-2. And I think that was good balance. Then in 2020, Justice Jennifer Brunner won, and the court became 4-3. So the supermajority in the legislature drafted a law that said, we're going to now put party affiliation on the ballot. Not for all judges, just for Supreme Court and Court of Appeals judges. My understanding is they were going to do it for all judges, but some of Republican judges in larger cities had this big hue and cry and said, oh, we'll never win in our communities if you do that. And so they backed off and said, well, people don't want to know who all their judges are. And as you heard me say earlier, trial court judges are the ones people see all the time. They're the ones who are in the courtrooms. Those are the ones people see. People don't see us at the Supreme Court or Court of Appeals, lawyers excluded, because they come in and they have 15 minutes to argue their case each, and then we talk about the law. Sometimes the parties come and sometimes they don't. But we don't see people generally. We don't see the general public. So party affiliation was put on the ballot for one reason and one reason only, because the supermajority wants to stop jurists from the other party, the Democratic Party, from getting on the bench, getting on the Supreme Court and getting on the Courts of Appeals. And so I'm running for the first time in my history, and I'm the most experienced appellate jurist sitting on this Ohio Supreme Court, having served 12 years on the Court of Appeals and completing 6 years on the Supreme Court. I am, for the first time, going to have my name on the ballot with the word Democrat under it, and my opponent, likewise, will have his name with the word Republican under it. So it is the politicization of the courts that's happening. This legislation was not bipartisan at all. One single party did it. It was objected to by the Ohio State Bar Association, comprised of lawyers and judges all across the state. It was objected to by the Ohio Judicial Conference, made up of Republican and Democratic judges. None of us wanted this. But playing politics with the court, the legislature went and did this. And so now what that has led to, which is a question you'll probably get to ask me about my opponent. So not only am I finding myself with party affiliation under my name this time, your viewers may or may not know, judicial seats, all levels, trial court, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court, are the only elected seats in the state of Ohio where you cannot run for the seat if you will be 70 years old before the term starts. I guess it's called constitutional senility for us. And so the Chief Justice, who was Chief Justice when I came to the court, had to retire at the end of 2022. and 2 of my colleagues ran for the Chief Justice seat. That meant the governor was going to have an appointment to whoever left the seat open. And the governor appointed, as interesting, his longtime friend and political ally, former Hamilton County prosecutor Joe Dieters. Now, Joe Dieters has never been a judge in his life. 0 judicial experience, not even a magistrate, not even run for judge. And he's been elected to several offices before. And at the end of last year, when we were finishing up our cases, he came over to me in conference and he said, Melody, I see you filed your petition to run for re-election. I just want you to know it's going to be you and me in 2024. And I stopped what I was doing and looked up at him and said, Joe, you're going to run against a sitting colleague? That's never happened in the history of the Supreme Court. He said, I know, it's terrible. I hate it. It's detestable. But I was told to get the appointment, I'd have to run to take out one of the 2 Democrats. So I guess I'm the low-hanging fruit, Mike Donnelly or me. And so he is only empowered to do that because despite the fact that he lacks the credentials to be on the court, despite the fact that he's not an independent thinking jurist, despite the fact that he's the only justice on the court with 0 prior judicial experience and has only been on the court for 18 minutes, okay, 18 months, party affiliation on the ballot empowers him to run to take out the most senior, not the most senior, I take that back, seniority is by time on the bench, the most experienced appellate court jurist, 18 years compared to 18 months. And he's only empowered to do that because party affiliation is on the ballot. And so he's hoping that people don't compare credentials, don't look at qualifications, don't look at public service, don't look at background, and just default to Republican because Ohio has voted Republican in the last 2 presidential elections. So that's the politics of the judiciary now.
And it's interesting, not to belabor the point, but it's just interesting in the fact that you have a justice that is serving in the Supreme Court currently, leaving the seat they are appointed to, correct me if I say any of this wrong, leaving the seat they are appointed to run, like you said, against yourself, which is now because party affiliation is associated in that scenario. So you actually have 2 sitting judges running against each other. Did I phrase that correctly, terminology-wise?
Correct. And two sitting justices, a sitting justice who's technically running against another sitting justice. Now, I'm not so naive to think that I would be unopposed, but I at least thought that when I was opposed this year, I would have a Republican judge, a Court of Appeals judge or trial court judge who was a good jurist. And there are many who are. I mean, there are excellent jurists in this state, both Democrat and Republican. And unfortunately, the politics of the judiciary is such that you can't even have any, quote, legitimately independent or unaffiliated jurists because the political parties are too powerful for that. So we're all Republican or we're all Democrat. But there are many good jurists on the bench. And so at least if I had one of them who was Republican, who felt he or she would be a good addition to the court, if I didn't win, the court would still be good. It would be a quality court. The court has decreased exponentially, one, with his joining the court, and now not only is he trying to stay on the court, he's trying to stay on the court and remove, again, someone who, but in my humble opinion, is an excellent public servant. And so if I don't win the seat, I am grateful for the opportunity to have served as a public official in this state for so many years. And I can retire. If he doesn't win, personally, he'll be fine. He's probably already retired. We look at this as the governor handed his friend a retirement gift by putting a seat on the court with our taxpayer dollars. So he'll be fine. But what I truly believe is that the people of the state of Ohio lose if he wins this race, because he will only win because of politics. He won't win by good public service. And for whatever reason, Mike DeWine gave him this seat. For whatever personal or political reasons, because the governor's son is also on the court, and they're all good friends. You know, my opponent and the governor's son are good friends. The governor's son's significant other is my opponent's senior law clerk. It's just kind of a family, personal, political give and take that they do, again, which is offensive on taxpayer dollars. But I think the people of the state of Ohio lose, and not to be critical of Mike DeWine's governance, because I quite frankly think he's done a lot of good things for our state as governors, but this is an indictment on his political or personal reasons. I don't know if he would have done this if he wasn't termed out and didn't have the chance to run again. And so I hope people send a resounding message that to this governor and governors that follow, Republican or Democrat, don't use your appointment authority to put political puppets in our judiciary.
Yeah. Now, as a follow-up on the party line, so to speak, when you guys, I mean the justices, I'll phrase you guys as a group that way, when you all are hearing cases that get through, that you approve, by 4 votes to get in and hear, and you give your opinions on the case, it's not necessarily party lines when you guys look at those. A lot of times you guys, you don't even really consider the party affiliation as you discuss a case and work your way through how you guys vote.
We are a very professional court. We're a very cordial and civil court. Rarely, if ever, are there discussions about party and politics in the courtroom. Being one of 3 Democrats on a 7-person court, I can't be in the majority without at least 1 Republican vote. So it's not. So we don't vote along party lines in that way. And I want the viewers to know too. Again, we are a professional court. The way we sit by seniority, I'm Justice number 5, and my opponent is Justice number 7. So we sit right next to each other on the bench, in conference rooms, whenever we're doing anything official. I have to open the door for him when we go on the bench. I hold the door for him when we come off the bench. And I haven't let the door hit him in the face, not a single time. And we are cordial of each other. He's got a wicked sense of humor. He's got a great smile. And as much as I don't respect the governor's giving his friend this seat, I do respect the fact that he is on the court. He is a justice on the court. He is my colleague. So I treat him just as poorly as I treat all my other colleagues. No, I treat him fine. And we are very respectful of each other in that way. So I hope the citizens appreciate that, because when we are there at the court, we do our jobs in a way that they would expect.
Again, we're speaking with Justice Melody Stewart, the incumbent for the Ohio Supreme Court. And I can see your passion as you talk about your role in the Supreme Court and the roles that you've played in law. And I really applaud anyone who steps forth into the political arena to take part in the process. What's your passion that drives you, whether it's in the law profession or in the political side of things? What's kind of your driving force and your passion?
Well, I've been the same way all my life. I only know one way to work, and that's hard and all the time. I did last year a career day. And I need to stop doing them because I'm getting too old for it. I said I'm not going to do a career day once I got old enough to be, kids' grandmother. So I think I'm past that stage now. But I was telling a group of students, I work as a Supreme Court justice the way I did as a Court of Appeals judge, the way I did as a practicing lawyer, the way I did as an office worker, a babysitter, and a newspaper girl. And I told the students, if I were your garbage collector, I'd be the best garbage collector you'd ever have. And one young man said, what is there to collecting garbage? You pick up the can, you throw the garbage in the truck, and you move on. I said, but your garbage can would be upright with the top on, not just lean over the side. There wouldn't be potato chip bags or wrappings around your curb. If you wanted your garbage can at your garage door, that's where it would be. The top wouldn't be in Mr. Jones's yard, and the garbage can in your driveway. So it's not even the title, and it's not necessarily the job you have. It's how you do that job that's important. So I've always worked the same way, and I don't know any other way to do it.
And then, so in your time in your law career, and also here on the Supreme Court, what are you most proud of?
I am most proud of decisions that I've written, particularly dissenting opinions that don't rule the day because they are dissents, but that later go on to maybe become law or to effect a change in someone's life. A prime example is when I was on the Court of Appeals. I was in a minority decision, 2-1 decision, to allow a conviction to stand for someone who, to me, the record was clear, was innocent of the crime. And my 2 colleagues in the appellate court affirmed that conviction. And ironically, the place where this crime happened in Cleveland, I'd have to pass every Sunday going to church. And so when I'd stop at the light there, and it's an old abandoned building, I would think to myself, I hope that if indeed the person is innocent, who was convicted and spent quite a few years in prison, is innocent of this crime, that one day he will see the light of day. And I also would pray for the victim's children who found her body in this case. And when I was running for the Supreme Court for the first time, I went to a breakfast at the Innocence Project in Cincinnati, and they had a bunch of people on the stage who had been exonerated. And the man who I wrote the dissent about was one of those people. Wow. And so if I never wrote another opinion in my life, that one is one I'm probably most proud of.
And now on the flip side of that, if reelected, what's something you'd like to improve on the Supreme Court?
I'd like to continue making our courts more effective and more efficient for the people we serve. It's amazing to me how we've been doing this, justice system thing for quite some time, but it amazes me how many things we do without data for information. I got my undergraduate degree is in music. I don't know whether people know that, and as I often tell people with the name Melody, what else would I study? So I'm a classically trained pianist, and so there's some regiment to studying music. And after my law degree, when I was on the Court of Appeals, I went back to school and got a PhD in social science. And that degree helps me to inform my decision making and help me to ask the right questions when I'm on the bench and think about some unintended consequences. But we need more data because we elect our judiciary. And so it turns over all the time. And when we put on robes, we don't become all-knowing. Mm-hmm. And although we have new judges training and things of that nature, we bring who we are to our jobs. And so data helps to inform, to weed against, I think, implicit biases and unconscious biases that we all have. We all have them. We bring them to our jobs. It helps judges in Licking County to see what judges are doing in Morrill County and in Cuyahoga County and Medina. And so it makes us a better judiciary. We have in our system now someone who can commit a crime, be sentenced to probation in one courtroom and go across the hall, someone with the exact same crime, exact same circumstances, and get 20 years in prison. And that just doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. And then finally, I'd like to make sure we continue to concentrate efforts on preventative measures in the criminal standpoint, and then just having the delay in courts cease and having our court system be more available and accessible to people, and working on access to justice, particularly in the rural communities. So many lawyers come and they work in the larger cities, but the rural communities need access to justice and need representation too, not just for criminal matters, but for mortgages and paperwork and contract and those things. And it's hard to find, and so we need to do a better job with that.
Mm-hmm. Again, speaking with Justice Melody Stewart, the incumbent for the Ohio State Supreme Court. Glad you're joining us here today and answering my questions. You've done a great job of answering my questions, but I want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything I missed or something you'd like to touch on, I want to give you the opportunity to talk directly to the voters and have your time. So the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to, first of all, thank you for having me, of course, and I'd like to tell your viewers, too, that I know the judiciary is probably the least understood branch of government. There is a website called judicialvotescount.org, judicialvotescount.org. It is a nonpartisan website housed by the Ohio State Bar Association. And you can click on your county, all 88 counties are there, click on your county, and it will give you every judge that's running in your county, Common Pleas Court, Court of Appeals, and Supreme Court. We are able to put our profiles up there that you can compare yourself if someone chooses to put theirs up there. But at least that gives you some information, because I know it is hard, particularly in the even number years when so many judges are on your ballot. So I implore you to certainly use that as a resource to pick candidates who are quality candidates, who are good public servants, and not partisan political people. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, you'll see it as Melody J. Stewart on the ballot this November, the incumbent for the Ohio State Supreme Court. Thank you for your time today, and I want to wish you the best of luck this November.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.